We are red. Red is run.
Okay.
Did I miss something? Are we gonna pledge allegiance?
I was
He's
trying
gonna
to
open
turn off my
gaming.
phone to make sure it didn't start being a late start.
Okay.
Okay, good evening and welcome to Thursday, January 16th, 2020, Selectmen's meeting. We could all stand and say the pledge of allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First thing on our agenda is the minutes of January 9th, 2020.
On page 3 of 4, at the top where it says other. Tim noted receipt of a notice of the hauler tipping fees increased to $70.39. Okay, I got it, never mind. I got it. I was thinking that he was saying $70.39 was the increase he wanted to make, but it isn't. I read it the second time. page 404 at the top, commercial marijuana opt-out. Could we add some language in there in the discussion of it being a warrant article to gather information rather than one that has standing?
Teeth?
To really get a sense of the community, I think, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, after all, marijuana is illegal as we speak, so.
So it's a
Somebody read-
non-binding warrant article.
Right, somebody would read this and think they're being a little premature.
Yep.
But it's to gather information.
Well, that's debatable.
Also on 4.4, you have Bitter Lane, it needs an N on it, under other. Brief discussion of the conveyance.
Mhm.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes as corrected.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion or anybody need any further time? All those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Next thing on our agenda is the stipend policy.
Do we have the actual copy, or do we go from our other notes? Did someone review it again or no?
I believe Catherine gave you all a copy of,
So we're gonna go from this, right?
yes.
I didn't get anything to change it from anybody. I need to send that PDF to you.
The only, I shouldn't say the only, but a question that was asked last week was whether or how this impacted an elected committee, for instance, or specifically the budget committee. And I believe I sent you all the RSA on that. So according to the feedback from NHMA, they cited the chapter 31:9-B, that basically it's already addressed in terms of proration or how somebody gets paid on the budget committee if they're missing meetings. There's the opportunity for the chair to, if the person misses 4 consecutive meetings, to have that person removed. So,
So that policy's already in place with the RSA.
right,
Well, I don't think you're, so the RSAs don't cover stipends. This is monies due them for services rendered. The stipend is not for services. We're not paying them, anybody to be a committee member. It's supposed to be a reimbursement for, expenses, gas, mileage, et cetera, et cetera. That's what it was always meant to be. So I think it still applies to even elected budget committee members, because it is a stipend. And being removed from office is different from, I think the question was, what happens when a committee member, leaves, let's say 4 months into the game or 8 months into the game, and somebody replaces them. How do you deal with each of those? And I think it's in here that it's prorated. So if let's say I was a member of whatever planning board, and I left after 5 months, I resigned. I couldn't attend anymore. and I attended in that 5 months 80% of the meetings, then it would be prorated to the 5 months. See what I'm saying?
5/12.
But if I left and I only attended like 20% of the meetings, then,
Later, Gary.
you know.
So this is the second portion of this paragraph. This is it down here, the correct
The bottom one is
the one that,
where I added it because John had raised this question. So I sent it out to everybody who suggested new language.
make a motion, we accept the stipend policy as written.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion and second to accept the stipend policy as written,
Effective immediately.
effective immediately. Any discussion on this? Seems no discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
And one opposed. Okay. Wow, we are 30 minutes ahead of schedule.
Oh, let's take Jeannie then and get
It's gotta
way
be
ahead.
something, something.
Jump right in on the next thing.
Yeah,
Okay, so we're just gonna go, keep moving right
I'll
along.
let Tim know he should be coming up soon.
Yeah.
oh, let's do Jeannie, get her out of the way and we can just keep moving.
Get you out of the way.
Well,
Well,
you know what I meant.
we'll do the selectmen's reports. And then, if we still have some time, we can do some town administrator
Or
reports.
you don't want me to talk to him up right now?
He can wait a little
Okay,
bit.
all right.
Pat, do you have anything?
I don't, I'm going to fill in, we're gonna have a brief non-public, later on some personnel issues that came up over the week. I'm still getting calls on Cedar Street that potholes are getting much larger. And we can give you a brief synopsis of the negotiations, however, we're meeting Tuesday night, and next week would give a better indication of where we're at. But if you, in non-public, or non-meeting, if you would like a small update, we could do that. That's it for me.
Catherine?
Madam Mayor, basically questions. The walk from town hall to the parking lot, where are we with putting a light on the building and the camera?
I believe the camera's going in shortly, and I know Tim is working on the light.
Tim was working on the light
Well, getting the light installed.
for outside the door?
Yep.
Oh, I'm just surprised, I expected to hear Kevin. Public Works.
Yeah.
Either one is fine,
Well, I don't think Tim was physically installing it. I think maybe getting the
Hardware.
that's fine.
He had said something to me the other day about it, Tim did, so.
Good, that's good, I'm glad it's going in. The light in the bell tower at Rufront Park is out. That needs to be replaced. And it was brought to my attention that there's a bill that's going to be going before the legislature that's going to require us to take verbatim minutes. Yeah, so somebody's not happy with minute taking.
Who in Concord doesn't have any time on their hands?
I know.
Come up.
Boy, you're gonna see people fleeing from that job.
Well, and you can see the expense that we'd have to
We have to
hire.
hire someone.
We'd have to hire secretaries for like a minute.
A stenographer, basically.
Oh,
A
yeah.
stenographer.
One at a time and speak slowly so that this can be,
So, I mean, my first thought was that the New Hampshire Municipal Association must be all over it, but can we make sure? Just to be sure.
I would vote no.
I just, you know.
Emphatic no. It's just an unfunded mandate passed down to us again.
And then, we have this audit that was done, energy efficient audit that was done back in, we got this in May. And I'm not suggesting that we do all the things in this because it's pretty pricey. Town hall total was $601,000. But there are some things in here that we could do as far as the lighting and the LED. Did we abandon this?
No, we didn't. So the last piece was the gentleman who came in, they were working with the police department because the last piece was going on a ride-along with the police to check the lights, you know, in town, about what lights were out, what lights needed, or what they could do with those lights. And I know there was a scheduling, they were working on schedules, but it's been a while. And I had periodically been reaching out saying what's going on, and I got an email from him, I want to say a couple of weeks ago, saying that they were almost done.
Okay.
It's been a while.
I mean, like I said, some of this, you know, the price that they have to do some of this stuff is pretty high. But I mean, here's a simple one. During our audit, the town village found several areas that have no pipe insulation. That's pretty sympathetic. So I'm saying some of these things we could do in-house. That's it. Okay.
Peter,
Nothing at this time.
and goes to Joe.
Yeah, I got one. I just had the paper, now I don't. The planning board is putting forth a amendment. Oh, here we go, zoning amendment. It's concerning home businesses and more clearly defining what a home business is. It was moved forward onto to be voted on by the planning board, but I think, and I still believe this, according to this, they just deleted home businesses will be required to do a site plan review. So I voted no.
Is that the only change?
No,
There's a bunch of additions.
Here, you want to pass that
Can we
down?
get
I've only
this?
got the one copy. But that's the proposal right there. And hopefully Leanne is going to be in touch with you, because I was quite concerned.
Well, my understanding is that it was voted on and it passed, and so it will go on the warrant. And
Indeed.
in fact, in your packets, you have the latest update of the warrant, and it is included.
Oh, no, I understand that part of it. I was just interested if it was indeed true that site plans are not required.
I'll have to ask you.
And I asked her to ask you, so I'm sorry to blindside you with that.
Yeah, no.
But the other stuff is parts of it are.
Is there a place where we can get this information?
Do you want me to copy that?
Leanne,
Yeah,
the planning board came out of the planning board, so Leanne has it.
And if you recall, she was in front of this board probably a month ago and talked about it.
We didn't go into details about what was deleted and what wasn't.
Well,
It was general. This is a listing of very specific language.
yeah,
So I'm just, for the camera and for the sake of people listening, is there a place for them, is it gonna be posted on the
Well, it will be in the town report. But yeah, we can have it put on the website.
we had a public hearing and nobody came.
You did? I didn't even know that.
Yeah.
Well, we had the notices up and stuff.
Let me guess, you published it in the paper.
Yeah, and hung them in the usual and customary spots.
Where's the town crier? Hear ye, hear ye.
Anything else, Joe?
No, that's me.
The only thing I received the email, apparently there is a firm, they started the Tilton Heights Solar.
Is that when the letter from Kathy Mitchell?
Yes, and it's to Connecticut, wishes to buy electricity, and they want to set up solar in Tilton, and they didn't even have the right county for where Tilton's located or anything, so I'm not sure what's going on with that.
Well, if you remember, gosh, months and months ago, I let you know that I had gotten a call about this, and they had wanted to come to talk to the board about the project, and they had to reschedule, and in fact, they are planning to come in February to make a presentation to the board.
For a pilot?
I don't have any details. I told them, or I asked them to.
Why else would they come to see us?
I asked them to provide us with the information that I could give to you before the meeting, so
Okay, thank you.
I don't have anything yet.
But apparently Connecticut has already agreed to purchase
Yes.
electricity from Tilton Heights Solar. So,
Oh, well, good for them.
So, that's all I have. So, flying right along here. Jeannie?
Okay, so you have my report, just a couple action items. Deanne and Jeff Quirk of Keach Nordstrom did a inspection of the property, and they are now recommending a reduction of the letter of credit for Country Meadows Manufactured Home Community in the amount of $27,749.50. That leaves a balance of $40,047.60. I have the document here. There's a suggested motion, John, and I don't know if you want to make the motion, or if anyone wants to look at it, but Leanne says they've done the site walk, they've confirmed everything, and they're making that recommendation. And Keach Nordstrom does represent the town.
Okay, so I'm going to make the motion, then we can have discussion on it. I'm going to make a motion to reduce the letter of credit number 2018-08 for Country Meadows Manufactured Home Community, LLC, New Hampton, New Hampshire, in the amount of $27,749.50. That's the motion. Second?
Second.
Can you read that again? Or restate?
Yeah, sure. The motion is to reduce.
Oh, to reduce, okay. I don't know why we don't give the total in the motion, that would make more sense, that's all.
Under discussion,
Go ahead.
it says after an inspection of the property, but do we know what exactly we inspected? What was the criteria for them to do?
So it is in the inspection report, and I can read that to you. It says bond reduction inspection, Leanne Winahan, Town of Tilton, Kevin Lacasse, New England Family Homes, and I conducted an inspection of the above project on January 9th, 2020. The majority of the work of the road work has been completed, and it looks like the Hiltz excavating crew has pulled off the site. Carpenters and other tradesmen are building houses, and Kevin anticipates most of the new houses will be finished by this time next year. Even though the ground is covered with a few inches of snow, I was able to confirm with photos and invoices supplied by Kevin and by digging out snow, the following items have been fully or partially completed: the Bitcon sidewalk, barrier gate, SWMB 5, and about 20% of the survey bounds and pins. So based on my observation and inspection of the site and photos and invoices from Kevin Lacasse, I calculated a reduction to the bond and emailed the results to Ms. Moynihan for review. I inspected the site to verify the items that had been fully or partially completed. I have not inspected the work as related to the conformance of the approved plans. And attached to that document is the performance bond release that lays out, and you've seen this before. I think this is probably the third time they've come as they're reducing down.
That's why I asked, I wanted to know what was left.
So
40,000. 40,000,
No,
47.
work, I meant not money, work.
Oh, okay.
Call the question.
if I call the question, all those in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Oh,
Opposed? Unanimous.
Yeah. The next item under action is a review of the updated warrant. New additions include, I mentioned this before, the zoning amendment. There is a warrant article for an expendable trust fund for the senior center, and the very last item, after some feedback from folks relative to the marijuana commercialization, and that is under Article 12, other business that may legally come before the meeting, and it starts with the selectmen are seeking input from the community on the following. It says to see if the town would want to designate, I'm not going to read it all, but because you've got the language.
Please
but
do.
You want me to? Okay.
I would love it.
To see if the town would want to designate an area in the town of Tilton for all marijuana cultivators, marijuana testing facilities, marijuana product manufacturers, marijuana retailers, on-site consumption at a business location, and any other types of licensed marijuana-related businesses, and the conducting of such activity for commercial purposes by whichever name used, should marijuana become legalized. So to see if the town would want to designate an area should it become legalized. And they're asking for a sense of community. And so I talked with NHMA about this, and I said the selectmen want a warrant article to get a sense of the community about commercial activities, should it become legal. He says if that's a desire of the select board to get a sense of the meeting on a non-binding warrant article, the proposed language would be appropriate. At the end of the business meeting, the select board would ask the moderator to permit the board to propose the non-binding article for consideration by the meeting. The board should be sure to review what it intends to do with the moderator before the meeting to make sure there will be no hiccups in presenting the non-binding article. I did talk with Steve directly about this because I wanted to understand. He seemed to think that we were not going to put the language on the warrant article, or on the warrant, and I said, no, I think you put it on there and let everybody see it. But you still want to have the conversation with the moderator. But it's not going to be a surprise to anyone. And it is non-binding. So the other item on the new addition is the expendable trust fund for the senior center. That's Article 5 on the second page. Pat, I don't know if you want to speak to that, or if you want me.
Good.
Okay, so this article, I've talked with DRA, the Department of Revenue Administration, to make sure we get the language right. Essentially what this does is sets up an expendable trust fund that you put money into that would pay for the operations and maintenance not only of for the building itself, but also for any vehicles.
Correct. And it allows the taxpayers to vote on it, instead of here having a push come to shove meeting with the selectmen. It brings it to the floor of the legislative body.
Just one other thing quickly, and if you want to go back to that, that's fine, but, you know, Selectman Dawson sits on the budget committee, and I believe last night they did vote on the operating budget, so that number is in here now in Article 11, so that's the other change.
They added $3,000 to the maintenance line. They also changed the name of it to, for the gas and maintenance of the van, if we get it.
They renamed it the Senior Center Maintenance, is what I have from
I
Tim.
believe so, yes.
Any questions?
So should we change this to the amount that the budget committee put in the budget?
Are you talking about Article 5?
Warrant Article 5, we have 5,000.
Right.
I believe the budget committee brought it up to 8,000.
Oh, okay.
What to 8,000?
The maintenance line.
They did?
They did. They added 3,000 for the maintenance of the proposed van.
John?
I
9,000.
mean, it can be added at town
So
meeting.
you've got how much, we've got how much on the maintenance line?
9,800.
And we're gonna raise another 5,000 for the trust on top of that?
No. If that passes, this will move into that fund.
Well, a portion of it.
Right, a portion.
Or we could,
But I'm appropriating it here, and then on the budget, that new number there to the total, if you don't adjust it,
Then
then,
you adjust it.
okay.
Then you adjust it.
So this allows for the van to be purchased without any input from the selectmen?
No, it
no,
does not. It allows for maintenance costs to be put into the budget in case we get in anticipation of the grant to us, and it also allows, it also corrects a wrong that was done 10 years ago when somebody stood up and said, we'll never go back to taxpayers for anything for the senior center, and that's held over the senior center's head for at least 10 years now, because it's 10 years since in May, it will be 10 years since we've opened.
even though every 10 years we raise money for the
Even 10 years,
building.
right, and even though we raised that for what's there, and we've done building expenses and so on, and then the executive committee has raised well over $150,000 in the last 10 years. It's shameful, in my opinion, that we don't help our seniors in a way that we can. In the last 10 years, we've done approximately $67,000 to the Pines Community Center. That's over $600,000 that we've done. In the last 10 years, we haven't even touched $5,000 a year to just go with everyday electricity and gas for the seniors, the senior center. And we provide, not only do we provide meals up there and a place for them to go in programs, I can't tell you how invaluable the networking is. We have seniors that go every single day, and if those seniors do not show up that day, there are people that go out and look for them and make sure that they're okay. And one day, a few years back, if you all remember, there was one person that came every single day, and Jane was the one that went out and checked on that person, and she was head down in the snow bank and had been there for a couple of hours with suffering from hypothermia and a lot of other things. And that's what our senior center does. And I think, you know, we this year we approved $171,000 for outside agencies, and yet all year long, if anything comes up with the senior center, they'll say, do you remember 10 years ago that somebody got up and said, we'll never go back to the taxpayers? That initial $20,000 that they gave us to renovate that kitchen and open up the resources turned into at least $150,000 worth of grants and donations. And by gosh, it's going strong 10 years. And I just got this from Jeannie that Belmont is closing their senior center, so we are really grateful that our senior center is thriving, and we should support it. Not only the senior center, but the seniors in our town.
So, my question is, the amount, 5,000, seems like that's the exact same amount that was asked for the bus.
That was
Well, it was $6,000 for matching funds for the bus, and there's $3,000 for the average cost of what a maintenance and operation was bus, because that was determined by the community action on what their buses usually cost, which would be lower because it would be a brand new bus the first couple of years.
So, I know a couple of weeks ago, I asked for some information, and some of the questions, have we done a state of the need for the bus, and documented that? And is there any information from CAP about our needs and their ability to coordinate? They have 3 buses, correct? And that presently operate in the area. The other things is who will manage and administrate the program, you know, complete the reporting and the requirements of the grant.
I thought we answered all those questions last week.
No, I asked that
So,
a few weeks ago, I didn't get any of that.
well, Jeannie and I and the Director of Transportation for Community Action are meeting next Friday and working on the grant itself, getting the information. There are certain criteria that we have to do, which is one, a survey to see what the usage would be. That's all part of going for the grant. But if you don't prepare to have this in the budget, once the grant in the spring is there, if you don't have the matching funds, you're going to go for another year, and they may not be that federal monies. Community Action has a detailed list of what it costs to run a vehicle similar to what we're going to ask for, and they gave us information last week that it would be around $3,000 maximum. That was in our information packet last week. I read it. For maintenance and for oil, but it would be a lot lower considering that it's a brand new vehicle, and it would be much lower because they're basing their figures on having it serviced elsewhere. We could have it serviced with our own highway department who does the cruises, so it would be considerably lower than that. But they had given us a figure around $3,000, $2,000 for a vehicle.
Per year.
Right,
Maintain.
that's correct. So you're looking at around, initially, the $6,000, which is the matching fund. So if the vehicle costs $70,000, $85,000, $70,000, our input to that would be $6,000. And then to keep it running for the year, it would be around $3,000 or less. That's for the maintenance and operation of it. That would be insurance. And as far as drivers, they would all be required to have, and this is part of the grant process, all have certifications from the Community Action Program, which are licensed to do that. And we have drivers now that are certified in town. We have drivers that have taken the certification because they drive seniors. It's all part of that committee.
Now, with the closing of Belmont, And CAP has 3 buses now, but will that make one available for us to use that's already there?
My guess it would be not, because they'll probably use that in Laconia, but we don't have, our resource was to be in conjunction with the Trip Center. When they weren't using theirs, we could borrow it. But that's never really happened because it's always in use.
If you're looking to buy it off of CAP, my guess is you're not gonna have any grant. The grant's gonna be on a new vehicle only.
Well, I was just saying use theirs. The other thing, who would be responsible for cleaning off every day when it snows? Somebody's gonna have to get out there first thing in the morning before it's used and clear the snow off of the roof.
The driver would be responsible for that. That's part of it pre-trip. Part of the requirements of the certification for driving.
And is this just for seniors?
No, it would be seniors and disabled.
Seniors and disabled?
Right.
And how many riders do we expect to have?
Well, we're looking for a 12-passenger van, 12-passenger vehicle.
I mean, like, based on the need, what would the usage be? I mean, presently, we have people getting to the senior center, but how many people would be actually riding the bus? You know, whatever our needs.
Well, it's just a speculation because we don't have one right now. But judging from what we've asked in the last 2 or 3 years, we would not only help with the seniors now. So the problem is with the bus that comes now, it's a very limited and on-time schedule. They drop the seniors off, they have a very limited time to finish their meal, and some don't finish their meal or engage in any of the programs, and they're being picked up. This would allow them to stay a little bit longer and engage in the programs that are offered at the senior center. And also, it would open up the door for us to be able to go down to New Franklin Apartments and pick up regular, where they don't pick up there.
Do you know how many people ride the bus now? The ones that get picked up?
I can get that answer for you, but I don't. Going to the senior center, there's probably about 10, I think, that get picked up, dropped off at different times of the day. Different days,
by the
depending on the
bus.
days. Depending on the days, yeah.
Those buses have a regular route though, they don't.
And they go from Franklin up to Laconia, and then they come back, and when they come back, you have to be ready for them to be picked up. And that's a real issue, because some of them have to just pack, Cindy and Emily have to package their food up because it's not finished yet, and then they take it with them. And it's not an issue to them, but they would like to stay and engage in some of the programs that they have. Exercise programs and different games and activities that they do. Music,
The bus would be owned by Tilton or by the senior center?
town of Tilton.
By the town of Tilton. Any other selectmen thing, that we have so many in the audience at once?
The Department of Transportation will actually own it. They will hold the title on it.
Right, they own the title on it, but it's the town of Tilton, right? So it won't be the senior center. We can't own anything, the senior center's under the town of Tilton.
Question?
Just curious, Patrick, how many seniors are going to the center on a daily basis?
Anywhere between 50 and 60.
So if you think about getting that van, I'd rather have the seniors off the road, frankly. My 56-year-old mother gets retired with a driver's license.
Easy.
But I think a lot would participate in that versus driving themselves or having someone give them a ride.
Well, can I just say something?
Sure, go ahead.
So, Pat mentioned that we're meeting with them next Friday, and they will take us through a process that, the things that we need to be prepared for in writing the grant so that it will be a success, so that Pat mentioned the survey. When the survey's done, if it doesn't yield the information that that they're gonna be required to grant us that
Well, I see.
vehicle, it's not gonna go.
It's not gonna go,
So-
they're not gonna submit it.
Right.
So
Well, I mean,
part of the process.
we could submit it, but the likelihood of us being
Getting it.
successful is gonna be small if we don't have the data that they need to justify giving us, granting us that vehicle.
So this all gets reviewed in the process of applying for the grant, all the questions are.
All the questions you're in, the grant is about that thick. And I looked at it and my head hurt after I read it. And thank God for Jeannie and Cindy Yansky, because, I mean, Cindy has done several of these grants. And so she's coming up to help us with it. So that, all those questions are gonna get answered in the next few weeks. And if it doesn't go through, it doesn't go through, John. It's not, we're the ones that end up making the ultimate decision once the grant is approved.
Just trying to get better
Yeah, and then
understanding how it all works.
And then as we go along, we can feed you the information as, okay, here's the step and this is the information that we have.
Joe?
Where is this vehicle to be stored? Will it be stored at the senior center? Winter and summer?
Yeah, why not?
Well, it reduces our parking. Sometimes parking, especially, certain times, is out in the street the way it is now.
Well,
Back
we've
it over
parked-
to yours, Joe.
We can park.
Sure, right around the corner.
We could probably make some, we've already partnered with Awakening Chiropractic to share that parking lot. And I don't know if you were here when we did that, Joe,
Yes,
last year.
yes, and I'm all about that.
So that opened up the parking lot
Mhm.
quite a bit. And if we have the van to pick up people, there'll be less vehicles there.
That's true. Because I see them come one. They don't
Right.
carpool.
They don't carpool, correct.
Jason had a question?
Well, it seems, it would, logically, aren't there vandalism problems up there to begin with? Wouldn't it stand to reason to have the vehicle stored at the town garage behind lock and key and surveillance, and then the certified driver can go sign out the vehicle, take it, do the route, go back, and then leave it there, where it could be under some watchful eyes, and, maybe
Could
it's
probably
the
answer
thing
that for you.
the guys can keep it brushed off, or maybe they can get it under one of the, lean-tos. I don't know, just leaving something, an asset out there, nights, weekends, I don't know.
Presently, we've already made arrangements for having surveillance put in there, cameras and that, but no, it's a good point to keep a.
It's an excellent point, and I have absolutely no adverse desire. I mean, I don't, it doesn't matter where it's stored, but the issue is that we have nighttime activities and we'll be using it at night as well.
Oh, gotcha.
So that person that will be dropping it off and bringing it back will be going to the garage. So that's something we can all work out, it doesn't matter. But there are nighttime activities that we'll be concerned with.
Okay, anything else? So I guess you're,
Make a motion, we recommend it,
article,
Article 5.
okay, so we have a motion to recommend Article 5. Any further discussion? Joe?
I was at that meeting where it was repeated several times that this senior center was not going to cost the taxpayers money for operations. I'm just saying. I believe in this, but it's going to come up. I just can't believe it won't come up at town meeting. Just saying.
That's why the warrant article.
That's why we want it to come up, Joe.
Yeah, and I'm just reiterating and saying, that's all.
So this article will just bring before the legislative body, and that's what this article is for, so.
I get it.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Unanimous. And next, we have Tim.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jean,
Well, let's just finish up on the
Yeah,
warrant articles. Do you want the article on the commercialization or not?
Yeah, so make a motion that we put Article 12 out on the warrant as a non-binding question, and also to let the moderator know that it's being put on the warrant.
We should
The
vote
Article
no
12?
when we see it.
Yeah.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Wait, 1 second. Did we have a second?
Second.
So we have a
Motion second.
we have a non-binding question at the end of the town meeting, Article 12. That they want us to ask to see what the townspeople feel.
Any other discussion? Too? Well, Chuck's reading that.
Who is they? They want us to put that on.
It's the,
Who is they?
It is totally up to you.
It's us.
What's that?
It's us.
It's us.
Okay, it's us, so we are they.
We are
I'm just trying to
well,
ask.
somebody asked us to put this on. Somebody asked us
It
to
was
put
brought
this
to
on.
our attention, and we were
Right.
asked if we wanted to.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I want to
And in
reiterate,
this format, I say
don't-
yes.
I don't want to, because it's presumptive that marijuana is an illegal drug. There's nothing that says it's going to become legal, and why are we talking about this at town meeting this year?
But
That's my,
I think one of the things,
foresight.
we look around,
yeah, all
and
right.
we see that there's been some towns that have created ordinances or to prevent like vape shops from being in their schools or certain areas, and just because kids may not know, and family type things that, yeah, they're legal and they're allowed at this point, but maybe not the best things in certain locations.
It's
So,
certainly not the vision in our master plan.
there's probably
It's
a lot
not.
of things.
It's not, and I think that even though, but we were asked to put this on, correct?
No,
No.
no, just to be clear, because I
This is your idea?
Again, Jeannie, could you repeat again?
so I sit on the board of NHMA.
Yep.
This is something that's being discussed. When I attended the annual meeting in November, there was a workshop on it. And it was an educational process to all the communities, and it's basically saying that you want to be prepared if this does happen. As the Selectman Dawson said, you're having foresight, you're being prepared if it does happen. It's like Keno. Keno, it is an opt-in situation. So you can make that choice whether you want Keno or not. The way the legislation is being drafted now in the State House, if it becomes law, if it does, there is no opt-in, it's opt-out. That means that you'll have retailers coming in right into the communities, and you won't have any time to react to that. It'll be too late because it's an opt-out, not an opt-in.
And we won't know what the actually legislative body
Right, and so
feels
this-
about it.
Right, and so this language is not about whether you support legalization of marijuana or not. It's about if it happens, do you want to be in control of where it happens in your community?
Right.
And this asks the legislative body to weigh in and give their opinion.
Yeah, your wrong step coming into the town hall is solid ice. There was an area just before it. So I let you know.
Okay, well, I think I can fix that. We have some salt and sand downstairs, don't we, by the door?
I noticed from the sidewalk to the step,
Just went up there, and yeah, on
would it be appropriate if I ask you a question?
on the warrant
We're
articles.
doing an
Yeah.
obstacle course.
I just wondered, I just want to make sure that this is going to be brought forward, that on some of my meetings, you would explain why it's there.
seeing you over here.
I'll handle this.
Yes, I
No.
was there last year, I will only be there this year, happy to do it. And then have Joe yell at me when I get back there.
We'll talk about this off camera.
So we have a motion on that. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, one more thing, because we just had Tim go downstairs pretty really quick. Town report, I've already sent out emails to the different committees, boards, asking for their report. You need to make a decision about who you want to dedicate this report to, because we've got some work to do. Last week, we discussed who you wanted to do in memory of. I think you all know who that is, but it was pointed out to me that you didn't actually vote on it. So does anyone need to be reminded of who that person was in memory? Can I get a consensus or a vote that that's who you want for the town report in memory of?
That's who you suggested.
Aye.
Aye, yes.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Theme, I'll take the next one. My thought is the theme should be, no.
Legalization of marijuana, yeah, there you go.
No, that it should be 150th year of Tilton.
Agree.
All right, is everyone okay with that?
Yes.
Good with that?
Okay, and then the last issue is the dedication of the town report. I can either pass out little pink slips and you can write a name down. There was a name suggested last week. Does that?
I make a motion for the name last week.
Second.
Okay. Do you remember, Peter?
I think there was a couple names I've seen, so I'm gonna
There
have
was
to
one written on
see.
paper. You see that one?
Okay, because there was another one floated around, that's all I was
Okay.
concerned about.
So that was a motion and a second.
Or the name that was written and passed last week? So you have a motion and a second?
Okay, I just wanted to be sure.
Okay.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? So moved.
Surprise.
Nobody knows yet. We're
Um,
keeping everybody secret
yeah.
on this.
Um, And he's not back yet, so just
Please don't.
another question that I wanted to ask. The filing period is January 22nd through the 31st. You mentioned that last week, John. For candidates night, I was going to ask you, would you like me to reach out to Chuck Mitchell to see if he will moderate the forum?
Yeah,
You should ask
maybe
him
we,
when you see him.
maybe we could
Maybe we could reach out to him when you see him.
reach out.
What do you think?
Yes, I expect to be on the ballot, but I would be willing to,
So if you're opposed,
no, I won't discuss myself.
I like your style.
yeah,
I love it.
I love it. Can I have a question with Jeannie? Did-
So that's good.
Yep.
Is this on that? So
Okay, you're
Chuck-
good with that, Chuck?
I'll be,
Okay, thank you.
Under the FYI, under the new sky,
Yep.
if they couldn't get their machines over there to do that job, how do we suspect that other companies will be able to?
That's what I'm gonna find out. They had apparently a bigger piece of equipment. I did talk with our DPW director to find out what the weight capacity is of the bridge.
Yeah.
And I've already talked to one person who's gonna go out and look at it, and I've got another name that I'm gonna reach out to.
I have a DR stump grinder that can do it,
Are you volunteering?
possibly. Not gonna do it today, but.
If the tree company was contracted with us to complete the whole job, from remove the tree right down to remove the stump, why should we be trying to find somebody to remove the stump. Isn't it their obligation to subcontract that out? And they have a large crane that they use to lift up the tree that they cut. I can't imagine that they can't lift their, or
Like
piece
the
of
equipment
equipment.
over to the island.
Put it over there.
They priced it wheeling it across the bridge. They can't do it now. Now, if you want to pay the mobilization to bring the crane back, I'm sure they'll gladly do it.
That's their mistake.
I did not see it saying wheel it across the bridge. I saw it grind the stump.
I understand, but in order for them to get a grinder out there, they're gonna wheel it across the bridge.
So we would subtract the cost
We
of,
did.
Yes,
Bid.
but how do we know the cost?
it was in the bid.
It was separated into.
No, what it will actually cost us, so sometimes a complete job, including the stump grinding, is one price, but when you go to a separate contractor and have to mobilize and get out there to do it,
I
it
believe
actually
this
costs
company
more.
did two different, the
Yeah.
stump grinding was separate from the tree removal.
I think what John is saying, I just got it, is that it may cost us more because we've got to go out to a separate entity and say, we just want this stuff down.
But I can tell you, the one company that I've talked to, it's the same price. But,
Probably the same machine trying to get over the same bridge.
Hasn't Public Works ground down stumps for us in the past? I believe they have.
If they are, then they gotta be going to Taylor to rent the machine.
I think so.
How would they get across?
Didn't they grind it?
I just think that we should withhold substantial amounts of money to cover that from that, until we have a firm bid on the cost of the stump grinding.
Did we sign a contract with this company?
they gave us, they gave us,
We signed a contract, or we just accepted the bid?
we accepted their bid.
They're not contracted.
And remember that this was all negotiated also with Northfield, who they have already sent us their half of the payment.
I think, we'll, like, we can continue then.
I'm done.
Done, you're all done?
I'm done.
Excellent. So Tim, you've got some information for us, and then the public hearing's at 6 o'clock.
It's much better now.
Thanks.
Okay, so in your packet, I'll be very brief, since I have 8 minutes. So in your packet, you'll see a copy of the operating budget. And I have here on the first page the tax impact of the approved budget from the Budget Committee, as well as the cost of certain warrant articles. And this is what I plan to go through. Just the updates based upon the meeting last night from the Budget Committee, unless Selectman Dawson, you've already gone through this information. You have already
Yep.
discussed this?
What? I'm looking for my,
Okay,
I'm looking for
so
my
just very
document
briefly.
that's supposed to be in
Yeah,
the
the
packet.
senior center thing, we've just.
Yes,
Okay, so you discussed the senior center, the addition to that,
Sure.
and the renaming of that line.
Yes,
And then also on page 4, underneath finance debt, the Budget Committee added the cost of the 10-year note for the architectural engineering services. So that was added to the budget. As already mentioned, they added the $3,000 to the senior center maintenance line. And then they approved $701,229 for sewer, so that was the budget submitted for sewer. They approved that, and also $2,341,700 of revenue. So if you are, and also just one item on the revenue, which is on the very back page, our revenue this last year came within about $5,000 of our estimate. Once you factor out the unexpected $71,000 from the state for the shared revenue. So I would not expect that kind of accuracy each year, because we really don't have any appreciable forecasting ability on that, but we just happen to luck out. And I think the revenues for this next year are very reasonable, based on the trends, based on the activity that we've been seeing. So So in any event, on the first page, if I could direct your attention down to the portion that says estimated 2020 tax rate. So the Budget Committee approved budget is $5,868,010, which is up 3.6%. The majority of that increase is due to the Sewer Commission, which does not affect taxation, but it has to be in the operating budget for purposes of DRA. So the sewer budget, while it's in our operating budget, the sewer revenue is also in our revenue budget. So it has no impact on taxation. So in any event, as you can see, the $5,868,010 of budget, less $2,341,700 of estimated revenue, plus $129,949 of war service credits and overlay, which are the adjustments done at tax rate setting time. So it shows an estimated net raised by taxation of $3.656 million, and that works out to be a local town tax rate of $5.89 for 2020 versus 2019's rate of $6.38. So roughly a 7.6% reduction. The majority of the reduction is because at town meeting last year, the legislative body opted to purchase the land on Route 132 outright. So this budget and the reduction in the local rate reflects the absence of that in general. You can also see for the highway equipment, roads, streets, bridges, sidewalks, revaluation, and milfoil, what those warrant articles equate to in terms of a rate per thousand. So it's 6 cents per thousand for the highway equipment fund, 16 cents per thousand for roads, streets, bridges, sidewalks, 2 cents per thousand for revaluation fund, and 1 cent for the milfoil fund. So with that, if there are no questions or any changes, does the board wish to make any change to the budget? Senior Center maintenance line? No? Okay, that's all I have.
Tim, any luck on getting the projections for how the reevaluation will be affecting us in the school district and the fire budget?
So the school right now, there are no budgets as yet approved for either the school or fire that I'm aware of, but the preliminary that I can determine on the school is about 35-cent increase. That's compared to either $1.50 or $1.60 increase for those in Samberton, and a significant decrease for those in Northfield. And I'm glad you brought that up because in the past, for those of you that have ever served on the formula committee, I know Selectman Scanlon, Selectman Dawson, possibly others have done that in the past. I have. And at the last meeting, while I was thinking ADM 30%, I said ADM 30% and equalized value 70% in terms of the split. It's just the opposite. So it's 70% ADM, 30% EV. But in my head, that's what I was saying, but I didn't actually verbalize that. So I wanted to correct that. But in any event, that formula is what dictates how the appropriation is apportioned between the three towns. And a lot has to do with the Department of Education and the amounts of money that they allocate for low-income students and the needs of a particular town. We are receiving more money than we used to, but still, you're looking at Northfield at maybe a factor of 4 versus what Tilton, and Tilton receives more than Sanderson does. So it can be very dicey. As far as the fire district, I don't have any new information other than what you heard this last week from the fire commissioner, and also what I explained about the increase from the fire commissioner's budget. And then there does seem to be in the budget committee, and again, I don't know if they've approved that budget, but there are some new hires there, so that will drive some additional costs. But as I said, we're right around 62% this past year, and it seems as though we're on a trajectory to because of our equalized value and split and apportionment with Northfield for the fire district, it looks like we're headed into the 63-64% range. And depending upon how valuations go after that, I could see in a few years it's possible we could be looking at nearly 2/3 of the cost. But again, right now we're somewhere going to be maybe just shy of 64%, somewhere in that neighborhood.
So our actual revaluations that we did won't kick in next year, but the year after.
No, so for 2020, it will kick in for the fire district, but for school, it's 2 years prior.
2 years old.
Have you factored out the purchase of the land in last year's budget and then compared the two? That was an unusual circumstance.
Right, well, that equated to about 56 cents on the tax rate for the purchase of the land.
Okay, so being 6 o'clock, I'm going to open the public hearing on the bond. We've got quite a few people here. We're going to do a couple things. Kevin has a little presentation on what the bond is for. I think we all know, but he's going to explain where the numbers came from, and we'll allow for some questions. There's quite a few people here, so I want to make sure that everybody waits their turn and gets recognized before they ask questions. So go ahead, Kevin. I'm going to let you take over here.
Yeah, I just did it right now. Just said it.
Good evening, everyone. Catherine's actually going to do the presentation tonight because she's seen it about 6 times. So, for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm Kevin LaChapelle. I'm a taxpayer here in Tilton. I've lived in Tilton for about 22 years now, and I moved from way across the river in Northfield. And it's the reason I tell you that is because before my wife and I bought the property here in Tilton, we looked at where would be a good place to raise a family. And I know the river's not 10 miles wide like some people think it is, but the fact that when we factored in everything to raise a family, this is really where we wanted to be. So I tell you that just because standing here and doing this presentation for about the 5th or 6th time now, it's part of being in the community and probably the same reason why all of you live here. What I'd like to do first, though, is have the committee members from the Police Station Building Committee stand up and just introduce themselves real quick. Pat, you can start.
That comes with Tilton Selectmen.
Hi, for those of you who are fortunate enough not to know me, my name is Tom Damon. I've lived here since 2006.
Director, resident, mayor, that's it. Jason Wright, we did recognize on our slide, and I thought it was only appropriate because Jason worked with us for just shy of 2 years on this project. Although he's not currently on the committee, he had tremendous amount of input. So, Jason, thank you. It was a very well-rounded committee, we feel, and there were some great meetings that we all didn't agree on everything, and I think that's why we can come to deliver a project like this, so you know that we had the taxpayers' best interest in this. This particular committee has only been for the last 2 years, so we've been told. We're the 6th committee that's been working on a new police station since 2000. So it seems kind of, when you really try to wrap your head around that, it seems kind of crazy. What's different about our committee compared to the others? We don't look at ourselves as just another committee. When we sat down the first night, we looked at the fact that all of the other committees have reviewed the why do we need this, where do we need it, and everything that goes in between there. And There are some distinct differences in this particular committee. We feel that we were presented with a calculated time of opportunity. And what we mean by that is the fact that this site was available and it was the right price. We own the land now, that part is history. But the fact that when this committee first sat at the table, the first half of our meeting was actually up at Industrial Park Drive looking at 2 lots. And we had a set of plans in hand, and one lot was going to be a 2-story building, the other was going to be a single-story. We were going to have to blast some ledge, and there was, I'm going to get into the particular details of that, but that really drove us to the point of that's not where we want to be. And it took a little bit to make that decision, but we said, let's go back to the drawing board and see where we land. And where we landed was where most of all the other committees have landed, was where the center of all the call activity is, and it was right there at exit 20. And when we said that we wanted to buy the church property, those of us that had suggested it, we were quickly shut down and said we've tried before and they'll never sell it to us. We said, well, it's a different time. So that's where that calculated time of opportunity comes in, where we asked and they said yes. And they not only said yes, but they sold it to us for $100,000 less than its value. So again, that part's history, we own it. The construction manager process allowed for more accurate pricing. Is there anyone in the room that's familiar with the construction manager process in comparison to the traditional send it out for sealed bid? Because that's what we want to make the distinct difference here. Is our committee was presented with an idea of, if you really want to save money, go through the construction manager process and not the sealed bid process. Where sealed bid, we create the construction documents, we send it out, and they send back the bottom line, and that's what we bring to you. There's no paper on the table that says what the construction materials will cost. This is the bottom line, this is what it's going to cost you. And if we had outlined certain details, we certainly could have. But with the construction manager process, we were very hesitant at the beginning. And we researched this, and we met with other construction managers statewide. I met with other municipal leaders who've done the construction manager process. And it's estimated that a construction manager process could save you between $200,000 and $2 million. So it's like, well, if it's going to save us something, maybe we should keep moving forward with this. So with our architect and with the support of the selectmen, we chose to go forward with choosing a construction manager, and we chose Milestone Construction out of Concord. And we have David Beer here with us tonight from Milestone Construction, and they've been working closely with us for the last 8 or 9 months, getting you the product that you're going to see tonight. So certainly afterwards for the question and answer period, we can talk about that more. But that's really what allowed us to come with a straight face and say that we think that we've squeezed every bit of juice out of the lemon here, and this is the best pricing that we could get. We've been able to navigate carefully through the concerns from previous projects. We looked at all of those previous committees and said, you know, what were the concerns at the time? One of the things that we've had to deal with that the other committees didn't is the increased call volume and the types of crimes that are happening in Tilton. Certainly we can have Chief Cormier speak to that afterwards, but I don't think it's a secret to all of us that the type of crimes that are happening in our community they're 21st century crimes, and that's why we're presenting a 21st century police facility. Most of us would probably move out of town if we really knew what was going on in the underground in the crime world. The business community support it appears that this will really thrust us forward in this project. We've had a community business leader, Dennis Gaudette, stood in front of one of our public information sessions. We had no idea that this was going to happen. We knew that there was going to be a fundraising effort, and he said that his family would start off a $450,000 effort by donating $25,000 of their own money. And you probably could have knocked everyone in the room over with a feather when he said that. So we'll talk about that money in a bit. So those who have seen our presentation before are probably sick of seeing this, but I think these 2 photos really speak volumes for our community and the investment that we make to have good critical infrastructure. What is blocking that? Okay. So Sorry. Hey, sorry, you're gonna have to get a little closer there.
He always wants to be in the spotlight, you know?
Yeah, we'll take a picture, we'll put it on Facebook. So, all right, totally losing train of thought here. You look, if you just look around in the building that we're standing in tonight, the fact that the building was built in 1879 and we're still in it. You know, this building, it is the town hall. It was the rec center. It was the police station. It's had a fire in the building. It's been flooded, and it's been renovated, and we're still in the building. And when you look at the exterior of the building, and you look at the granite, the brick, the cornerstones, and you look at the folks who are twitching the cornerstone into place, and if we could only know what the controversy was at the time, and I'm very well aware that Charles Tilton donated the money to build the building. We're just waiting for someone in town to donate for the police station, right? But the fact that, can you imagine the controversy that went behind that? I mean, the town vote to make it Tilton was 300 to 301. Just think of the controversy. But the fact that we're still here, and we look at all the other critical infrastructure that we have in our community, the highway garage is superb. Our schools, I realize we have a shared school district, but we have outstanding facilities within our community. And what we're asking for here is the community support so we can have a police facility that's one of the same. At the 2019 town meeting, I'll go through this real quick, we purchased the land. There was a warrant article for the architectural and engineering that allowed us to move forward, and the Board of Selectmen voted to reinstate our committee and further our work. So the picture that you see on the board over there is the same picture that you can see in front of you. You know, as I looked at this picture last night, and I look at it again tonight, and it looks like, yeah, it looks like a police station. And anyone on the committee can tell you that to present you that picture, that came with a lot of discussion, you know, whether it was going to have a metal roof or a shingle roof or brick or block, or how many entryways is it going to have. And this is what we bring before you. This had a different look at the beginning. We talked about vinyl siding. We talked about being maintenance free. We talked about shingles versus metal. We'll get into that a little bit in a second. But this is the facility that hopefully, if we're successful to move forward with this, that we'll have here in our community. This is the rear view. You can see across the street. You have J. Jill there. This is the cemetery side, if you will. This is the parking lot for official use only. There was a lot of discussion on how many parking spaces, how many Sallyport entryways, garage doors. Certainly the radio tower was some deep discussion. But this parking lot that you're looking at also has the area where the septic system will be, and we'll talk about that. What else am I missing here? I think that's that. So as far as you can get a good eye on the lot here. This is the cemetery on this side. The architect was able to crowd the building itself towards this property line so we could maximize the use of the property that would not have building on it. A lot of discussion has come about what happens for our future. We're looking, 20, 30, 40 years down the road. Do we have the ability to expand and not have to go through this again because we have no room? And certainly we do. We promised the taxpayers last year that we would keep this remaining for recreational facility. I went back into the slides from last year and took the verbiage out, and it was to preserve for recreational facilities. And one important thing that I have missed over tonight that we feel is important is this committee is a fiscally responsible committee built on trust and integrity. When we talk about trust and integrity, what we're presenting you, things like the recreational fields, there was an effort, a valiant effort this year for other community buildings to be built on this property. And that is not how we sold it to the taxpayers last year. We said, no, we want that to remain as a recreational facility, and there it stands. So there was discussions about other municipal buildings being built there, maybe a fire station. And we said no. The layout of the floor. It's broken down, the color shades are broken down into different areas. You can see the administrative area that's up in here. You can see men's and women's locker rooms. There's an armory. We can read through certainly all the different areas of the building here, but I want to draw your attention to this room right here. The community room, the training room, etc. There was a lot of deep discussion about the size, the need. It wasn't the fact that we wanted it. We wanted it, but we also need it. And this morning I was involved in a presentation down in the town of Bow, and there was about 50 or 60 of us in the room, and there was state police was in there, Homeland Security, local police, local fire, railroad police, and all the agencies that we had worked with on a large incident. And it was standing room only. And last night we had a discussion about, why a building so big, why a room so big, we'll never fill it. And the fact that in today's day and age, in 21st century crime and emergency management, the fact that probably on most sunny days when it's not busy, there probably won't be anyone in that room. But the fact that when you need it, it's there. We'd like to say that we don't need a police or a fire station at all. Wouldn't that be nice? But it happens, and we're now building facilities that have emergency management centers in them. You can see that the dispatch center in this training room, community room is attached, and it's attached for a reason. We did some research on communities that have had large-scale events, and a lot of the complaints that come in during the after-action reviews of those incidents is the fact that they don't have a room where the professionals can gather for large meetings and briefings. Typically we would crowd into a small conference room, everybody jams in there, people stand in the hallway, and there's no space. So when you see, this is certainly the largest room in the building. This line right here is actually, we've made provisions within the construction plans to have a divider. The divider itself, the physical divider, is $20,000. And when we were going through the cost savings, we chose to take the divider itself out. Milestone Construction suggested that we frame the building so it could receive a divider at some point. So we took that suggestion, and the divider itself is actually on the documents as an add alternate, and we'll just remember that thought, add alternate, and we'll give you that in a bit. All of the doors are secured with magnetic locks. That's a requirement for police facilities. As you can imagine, we don't want folks wandering around. The lobby area right here, we'll be able to walk in here as the public. We'll be able to go into public meetings in this community room, and we will not be allowed to go beyond this section. There is men's and women's bathrooms here, so we can utilize those, and then we would go out. What else? See here. As questions come up, we can go back to it. This is the prisoner processing area and the holding cells, and there was a lot of discussion about this doorway right here. As you can imagine, if you were someone who had misjudgment, if you will, and you were booked and processed, you're not a hardened criminal, but you really don't want, the general public in the lobby seeing you walk out, that you would be released out through a door here and you could go into the parking lot. When we viewed 3 or 4 different police stations, there was one PD that said they wished they had done it, and there was another police station that said, hey, we hadn't even really thought about using this back hallway to release folks out through, but it works well for us. So we had taken that idea and we ran with it. These are 21st century jail cells. They're not wooden benches with handcuffs on a pipe from Home Depot. The jail cells are actually all monitored. The construction in here is made so when there's vomit, feces, and urine that gets in this area all the time, they can rinse it with a hose and it can be cleaned. When we looked at two different police stations, one was built to that specification and it all made sense. And then there was another that had nice VCT tile, and it would kind of make like a nice office area for your home, but it was not well designed for a holding area. So we were able to compare those during our work. You can see the Sally Port here. There was a lot of discussion about how many bays do we need, and how many bays do we want? And what we came up with is this area right here is a large evidence storage area with a fenced-in area. You can drive by any given police station, busy police station, and if there might be bicycles stacked up outside if it's viewed in a public area. There may be large evidence cars that are sitting outside and you might see tape on them. You can go to our police station at any given time and you would see a car, if the doors were open in the Sallyport area, there would be a car in the bay that they have for processing that would stay in there for days. So this area right here is chained and held for large storage, and it will be locked. This Sallyport area here, to drive in for prisoners, also to store large evidence. This area right here, previously, some of you may or may not have heard, we had originally planned for a carport in that area, and we were going through our cost savings. We chose to cut that carport area, just the roof. Originally it was designed so we could put the HVAC system on there, but when we were going through and culling out all of the additional costs that we felt that was more of a want and not a need, that was one of the pieces. We can go back to that, I'm certain there'll be some questions. Our work done in 2019, you've heard me say this: securing the site, evaluating the needs versus the wants, site visits to police stations. All of the police stations that we went to, one of them was brand new, built last year. It was too small the day they moved in. The Sallyport, they went from a 3-bay Sallyport down to 1 because they were trying to save, and they were already grown out of it. The officer area where their desks were, they were already grown. There was officers there working, and they said, yeah, our biggest mistake is building this place too small. So those are some of the things that we had considered. The 3 big things that we looked at was the fiscal impact. We knew that this was going to be a concern for the community. Listen, if I had a choice on what we would pay for the building, it would be about $200,000. Well, that's kind of unrealistic, right? But the fiscal impact that it's going to make on the community was important. That's why that's underlined. Functionality, in talking with the chief, the captain, and the sergeant that are offered advice to our committee, was the functionality. And then our architect, there's different designs that he can bring forward, but they're all, they're police facility designs, and there's federal regulations that regulate most of that. And the other piece is the liability reduction. We'll talk about that in a second. Review the previous work, securing the construction manager, obtaining pricing, value engineering. So value engineering, anyone that knows construction, value engineering is a construction term for pricing. In my world, it means cost reduction, is what that means. And that construction manager process allowed us to go through with value engineering. If you want me to go slower on this section, I certainly can. All of this was reviewed last year at the town meeting, but we still feel that it's important when we talk about wants and needs and why do we need a new police station. This first one is a little bit disturbing, I think probably more so for the police officers than it is for us, because they really understand it. The no air handling system within the police station, I had no idea that it was really an issue until they were talking about a Laconia police officer that was recently transported to the hospital from a fentanyl overdose from the fumes inside the police station. You look at the Laconia police station, you'd say, wow, that's a 21st century police facility. They never put air handling in there, and they were processing evidence with some fentanyl, and he was transported to the hospital from a fentanyl overdose. So the fact that our evidence processing area is in the basement of our police station, the moisture problems and all the other things that they have. The booking room and the offices are in the same space. Selectman Constantino was talking about a day that she was there visiting with the chief. Things got hectic, there was a couple of prisoners in there. Things got ugly for a little bit, and the chief grabbed her by the collar and ripped her into the office and closed the door and said, you stay in here. So that poses a problem. When he first told the story, I thought she was actually the prisoner, but that was not. No separate juvenile holding area. These are federal requirements. This is nothing that we're making up from our committee. No separate holding cells for male and female, and we have made those provisions. Someone throw something at me when we go back to the floor plan to talk about juvenile holding area, please. The bathroom that they have, so if there's 2 prisoners, the one holding cell, the makeshift holding cell that they have that was welded up and is kind of in the middle of the floor at the police station, actually has a bathroom that's in there now. But they use the other bathroom that they have for a separate holding cell. So if you were the 2nd or 3rd prisoner that was arrested, maybe you'd be lucky enough to get held in the bathroom. So that's, I guess in our minds, that's not really what we want to have for a police facility. There's no privacy in the interview rooms. It doesn't take much to figure out that they've outgrown the office space. Our committee talked at great length about the presentation that was made in 2006 at a town meeting. And we all looked at the slides and thought, well, you know, if you go in there with some lean process and you kind of organize the shelves and, you know, get rid of some of the junk that we can see in the pictures, maybe we can make it a little bit longer. Well, they did just that. They reorganized and, again, squeezing the last drop of juice out of the lemon. Raise your hand if you've tried to pull out of the police station. Yeah, how fun is that? The fact that pulling out onto Route 3 from the current police station is it's unbearable. In the ADA compliance and lack of fire exits, we know that that's an issue. If we were Primex, we probably would put blindfolders on when we walk through some of through municipal buildings, and certainly our police station is one of those. You know, it puts us at greater risk and liability. We've had incidents that have been over there, you know, folks slipping on the sidewalk, and the fact that when you walk in the front entryway and there's, you know, prisoners coming in and out of the same area that the general public is going in for information. It all poses a greater risk and liability. So here's what we really have all been waiting for, is the numbers side of things. And I've had some good discussions with folks on the street, and it's like, well, that's not the number I heard. What we want to make sure that we clear up is that we worked on a number to present the real number, which is underlined right there, the real number. We worked on that number until December 9th. So for 2 years, we've been building up to that point, and since July, we've been pounding through numbers. Our original number, our initial cost estimate on October 8th, the total project cost for what we would pay for from this year's vote would be $5.8 million. That didn't really settle too well with our committee, and we all looked at each other and said, we can't present that number. It's not going to happen. So through several meetings and a lot of hours, we culled through 3 or 4 more meetings. We went down during the middle of the week to Milestone Construction, and we worked through many lists of what we could cut. And one of the things of controversy, even probably and maybe even in this presentation, is the fact of a shingle roof versus a metal roof. We looked at the fact that it's $164,000 for a metal roof, and we said, well, the metal roof will last a lot longer, but if we want to shave that number, we've got to cut some of that out. We looked at things like door jambs, having different door jambs for different areas of the building. Did we need to have the standard magnetic lock sturdy jams in all sections of the building? No, not necessarily. We got down to the point where we were cutting toilets out of the building. And we thought, well, then maybe we'll just have to wait in line. It's like, guys, hang on, time out. You know, we're cutting things now that really truly don't make sense. When we looked at program and the square footage of the 12,200 feet and the square footage of the building, we committed to each other on the committee that we couldn't cut program because we did not want to come back to the taxpayers in another decade and ask for an addition. That would be wrong. And we listened to what all those other police stations and communities had to say when they were outgrown the day they moved in. So if there's a number that you want to remember, that's it right there. And if you want to remember another one that would, you know, chase you down a long, dark, scary hallway, it's that one. We'll get to, well, here it is. Still didn't make the correction. So on the top, when you see soft cost, and that's supposed to be a column, not a decimal point, on the 483,000. Soft cost is a term in the industry that's used for, that's our town cost to build out chairs, drapery, furnishings, finishings within the building, also the radio system. a portion of the radio system, the other half will be purchased by grant money. So the 483 is what it will cost to put items in there that are not the construction contractor's responsibility. We use Mango alarms for our security system and our door locking systems, and that's all part of that money. Construction cost, the $3,998,172. The construction cost is the material and the cost to build the building. That's what that's at. Originally, that was 4.8 million. And that's where the several meetings of coming back and calling through needs versus wants. And again, it really shines light on the fact that the construction manager process really worked well for all of us in the entire community. The owner's contingency fund, this is a standard contingency if we were to run into unforeseen problems within the price of the cost of moving into the building and preparing it. I did have we were talking about contingency money last night after our meeting, and David and I were talking about the site itself really lends itself to the fact that most of the time when you build on a piece of property and you start doing, you start digging with the excavator, that's when you start to find things like an oil tank that no one knew that was there or something like that. This site is about as clean as it gets. We've had test borings. The history on the site is clean, and they were actually able to drop their contingency from 10% down to 6% because of the confidence in the project. So that was another cost savings as we culled through that. Bond counsel, that's normal pricing there, and that brings us again to the $4,716,518. The business community, the initiative and fundraising for the $450,000 to offset the tax burden, and then the 25 that's already been set. Jeannie and the chief are working vigorously to work through different modes of fundraising, whether it's tiles, the La Chapelle family wants to buy a tile in the entryway for whatever the amount of money is, and other things that we can donate money toward to make that happen. Should we do the jail and bail tonight, Captain? Do you have any friends here? So we talked about doing a jail and bail where we would arrest, Selectman Dawson, and she'd have to call all of her friends to bail her out, and that money would go towards fundraising. So for all the right reasons, we've talked about many of these, but the fact that this property is not on the tax roll, and there's never any intention for it to be on the tax roll, we've committed to the Archdiocese that the town would not let any private industry build on that property. So the fact that if you think about it, if that was commercial property that any commercial business could buy, well, it would make more sense to put the commercial property on there because we could get the tax money. But the fact that this is not on the tax rolls currently really puts us in a good spot. The other piece of that is the fact that we have a police station now that the selectmen have already voted to sell that once we move into the new police facility. They'll sell that off, and that will go onto the tax rolls. Exclusive rights from the Archdiocese. The recreational land, we talked about that. The fact that it's prime location for law enforcement operations and response, this has been studied. There's a study that we paid for. They've mapped out all of their incidents. And Chief, is there a percentage of incidents that that are right there at exit 20?
I know the building committee that Captain Wellington sat on, they did a pin map, and probably 2/3 were in that within a mile of exit 20. So.
Okay, thank you. We did look at, so 2 years ago when we started talking about response and what area would we want it in, we did pull those numbers up. They're obviously not in my presentation. It addresses the liability and safety concerns and the overall cost savings. Last night, I didn't even really know that this was going to happen physically to me, but last night before we started to present, I thought about, all right, so we've got to present to the public on this project. And when we thought about how much money that we really, I don't want to say saved because that's not the right term, but shaved from the project, for us to present to you, I don't know how much lower we could possibly get this project down. Let's talk about the water and the natural gas and the sewer for that matter. It doesn't say sewer up there because we're choosing to go with a septic system. But the fact that when we were up on Industrial Park Drive, it was going to be over $500,000 just to connect to do the construction and connecting to the water. And the natural gas was going to have to be dug under the street, and so was the sewer. So when we looked at the availability of utilities and the cost of it, it just wasn't cost effective. Here at this site, the water's out front, the natural gas is out front. The sewer, however, is 900 feet down the street, and we would have to dig up Route 132. And that was going to be upwards of $200,000 just for that. So we've chosen to go for $16,000 for a septic system instead of hooking to municipal sewer. I'm sorry? So the way we feel is this is the time to get this done. If I can speak as a non-committee member and just as a taxpayer, I really don't want to spend any more tax money on studies and plans. We've spent almost $1 million on plans and studies and test boring for other land that we've looked at, and we still have nothing. We do have a nice piece of land now. We did purchase that. But all of that other money that we've spent, we're really hopeful that the community can get behind, this is our project, and get this done. And we really hope that you can join us in bringing this project to a close.
Kevin?
Yes, sir.
Juvenile detention.
What's that? Juvenile detention, thank you. So that's actually the last slide. Tim is going to address numbers on the number side of things. Those other slides are after if you want to hit those. But we can, do you want to do question and answer now?
Yeah, I think what we can do is show the juvenile detention, yes, to remind you.
Yep, thank you.
And then some questions about the building and the structure and the committee and all that. And then we can do a presentation on the numbers and the bond and how that will all work.
Thank you.
And Tim can do the, right, Tim?
Yes.
Thanks.
So one thing that I've been saying in all of our presentations is throughout our work for the last 2 years, we've heard that, well, you want your building to be big and this is going to be Bob Cormier's building. We need to remember that this is not Kevin LaChapelle's building. This is not Bob Cormier's building. This is our building. It's not the selectmen's building, it's not the committee. It's our building as a community because we're all paying for it. And hopefully we don't need to utilize it, or hopefully we don't have to have a short stay there. But the fact that it is ours, this is our community, this is our building, and that's the way we're presenting the project. So juvenile detention. So up in, actually, well, but when you look up in the watch commander's area here, I apologize for my back being toward you. The watch commander's area and the dispatch area is where the juvenile detention area is totally separated from this area. Those are, again, federal requirements to house juveniles in an area where they can't be exposed to the public and other criminals. So there was a lot of controversy during our discussions about, well, why can't we just cut that out? Well, that's not really the way it works. So there have been concerns previously during active incidents where juveniles are out in the open or they're held in offices. The police officers can't use that office because there's a juvenile in there, and it's being addressed in here. So we can go to questions and hopefully some answers. If there's folks that have heard the presentation before, if you want to just kind of raise the BS flag, if there was something that you saw that you didn't see before, or if you would like to correct me on something, please do. We just want to make sure that this is polished with a bow tie on it for town meeting. No question? Yes, ma'am.
How tall is the radio tower?
The radio tower, very good question. The radio tower is right now in the specifications between 90 and it can be upwards of 110 feet. So addressing the radio, the chief can probably address this better than I can. But in working, I had a lengthy discussion with the statewide radio guys today. about towers and infrastructure and all those different things. The fact that, why do we need a tower there? We have a cell phone tower that's just up the street. We have a tower that's on Caleb Hill Road. Can't we just put a tower somewhere else other than at our police station? We don't have one now, right? But I've asked that same question. The fact that the infrastructure of our radio system currently, I guess in speaking about it publicly, there's broken sections of our community where the police officers can't reach through to the police station, where they call and they get no answer, or the dispatch calls them and no officer answers. As you can imagine, and if you can go on publicly and watch the Ware shooting, where the police officer is pulling his trigger shooting, and the guy behind him is calling to dispatch saying shots fired, shots fired. I've been involved in Mayday situations before. I can tell you only get one shot. You only get one chance. Shot's not a good word. You get one chance. And I would not want to be the police chief bearing that responsibility, knowing whether or not you can get a radio transmission through. Okay, enough with the BS. Why do we need a 90-foot tower? The 90-foot tower allows us to reach out to other parts of the community, all of the community. Now, it needs other towers to talk to. We know that part. But this is the foundational piece that will allow us to call the other towers, Belknap Tower, if we choose to use the other towers in town. If we build this tower now, it's part of the infrastructure. We certainly could wait, and then we could spend the money again later when we need it even more. And I think that the fact of, you look at an intimidating tower like that, you think, listen, we don't need to talk to the space shuttle, or we don't need to talk to Mount Washington. And that's really not the case. The higher we can be, if you can go from 90 to 120 feet, it penetrates our service quality. Our committee talked about it. That was one of the items. We said, do we cut the tower out and leave the concrete pad? Certainly, what we don't want to have happen is cripple their ability. So that's why we left it in there. And if we put a tower there now, and we build out the other pieces of the infrastructure within our community, there's federal grants that allow us to reach out for that, which I just reminded myself on the other piece of federal grants. So if we do that now, again, it's part of the foundation part of building the facility. If someone would like to challenge, I guess, what I've explained, I would love to talk about it more.
What's the cost of putting the tower in?
The cost, I can get you to the penny in a second. Actually, do you have that, Tim, right in front of you? 'Cause I can grab
The
that.
tower is roughly right around $100,000 for the tower itself.
The
not
tower
including-
itself is 100,000 out of the 483,000.
What about the one that's up at Business Park?
Up at Business Park Drive, certainly there's the ability to get on there, but you need to run a cable underground from the police station to that tower. Because we still need to be able to transmit at the console to get to the radio antenna. Hence the reason for that. There's another piece that I'm a little bit reluctant to talk about, only because it's in the planning phases, that because of our location in Tilton, there's high interest level of federal agencies that want onto the tower. So AT&T FirstNet, that you've probably all seen on the news for the last 5 years, AT&T FirstNet is interested. I have a relationship with the folks at AT&T FirstNet, where they know that if this goes through, they'd like to evaluate the fact of getting on that tower. We also have other agencies that our police department works with, that they're also crippled in this area as far as radio communications. And once they found out that we had specified a tower, they too would like to get onto the tower. If I were going to sit at a selectmen's meeting and help make the decision of who do we let on, whoever we let on, we need to charge them. No rights for free. So whoever wants onto the tower would need to help pay for that. So there are options with that. Tim, are you going to hit the federal grant piece, or do you want?
I can.
Okay.
Whichever you.
Yeah, we can tag team it if you want when we get there. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Yes, sir.
What's the anticipated growth in town over the next 25 to 50 years? And is this capacity for where we're at now? And any additional growth would be additions to the building?
The growth rate that we looked at, so when we look at our population has actually stayed fairly level at between 32 and 3,500, right? But when we look at our population of folks that travel through our community, one of the things that we discussed was, is it going to grow? It will likely grow because of where we are in our location, the fact of vacationers. Our residential population is predicted to not grow in the next decade above 3,800, just in projections. It's the fact of who travels through our community. We'd like to say, well, we're a population of, say 3,500 people, and we need a police station like this. Well, we have to remember that our population during the daytime is not 3,500 people. We're between 12 and 15,000 people on any given day, and then you take a holiday weekend, and there's certainly more travelers coming through. We looked at, to answer the second part of your question, we looked at the location of the building and the land. We talked about, could we go up, could we go out? This current committee is reluctant to go up because of the cost of an elevator. We talked about an elevator shaft. What is the cost of that? We put a pad in for the elevator shaft now, and we chose not to because there's enough room to actually come out. It does have a lightweight wood frame truss roof on it, and you could rip the roof off it, or we could rip the roof off it, and you could go up. But the expense of that, who knows what it will be. So we feel that the best option, if there is growth in a building that we're presenting for a 40 or a 50-year building, that there's plenty of room to come out. So we had the discussion last night about what can you tell us if this facility is going to be big enough for 20 years from now. Who would have ever thought we were going to have the types of crimes that we're having now? If we could predict what types of crimes we're going to have, I guess if we could say, hey chief, can you make all the crime go away, then maybe we could downsize a little bit. But predicting the crime piece I think is difficult for us. We haven't seen anyone that can predict the crime pattern. Construction estimates that go along with the question, Ken. Construction costs have gone up 45% since 2005. So luckily we didn't look that number up until about 2 weeks ago, because you start thinking about, okay, now's not the time, let's wait 4 or 5 more years. Well, the fact that Tim's going to talk about the bond rates, and that really would put us in a bad spot if we kick the can another 5 years. Yes, sir.
I would just like to make a comment, and that is that I believe coming up before town meeting this year is going to be a bond issue for the extension of the sewer line. And I just have a concern that here we are trying to put in a septic system when we don't really have to have, I don't believe, that far to go. I can't believe that we can't somehow or other run a sewer line to this building rather than putting in a septic system on this site. Personally would rather see the sewer line extended to this building, even if it meant cutting back on the sewer line extension on the west side of town.
Yeah, I think that's a great comment. That's why we have these public hearings, right? Just so we can have input like that. Our committee chose, when we were cost cutting, to pull out $165,000 extra for the sewer. For us to pull that out. We certainly can add it back in, but that was a cost that we chose to cut. I would be interested to see what the other opinions of the community are, and certainly when we come to the point in the town meeting, we do have the pricing to get the sewer line in, and we can add that number in easy enough, depending on what the body chooses. That sounds good.
And you have $250,000 basically in the contingency fund.
Yes. There's another piece of this project that we should also talk about is once the final numbers, and we choose the contractor, the plumber, the electrician, and to do the job, the dirt work, the concrete, there's a high possibility that number will come down. That pricing that we have is the maximum price that we'll pay based on the contractors that Milestone has reached out to. So when we look at the contingency, we look at the other potential savings. If we want to add the sewer in as another add alternate, that's one thing I said I was going to talk about, is we could put the sewer in as another add alternate. we can put the metal roof on as an added alternate. There was a pretty loud voice, a few loud voices last night that we want the metal roof. We certainly can do that. The body has the ability to add that in, and we have that pricing. The other one is the divider. Yes, sir.
In the same thing about whether one were to run the sewer line up there, I would think now that the industrial park has water, that in the long term it would be beneficial, since this is a good chunk of the way up the road already, that the industrial park would want the sewer line as well in the future. I mean, when you take a look at what the possible development up there is. So, I mean, to me, that just makes sense, but that's just my 2 cents worth.
Okay, thank you. Jason?
Well, Jason Wright, former committee member and sewer commissioner for the last 13 years or so. So to Chuck's point, one of the things that came up in discussion but was never followed up, and Chuck makes a good point, is why not pick up sewer down in front of Walgreens? And it doesn't, the 165, just for everybody's knowledge, that $165,000 price includes going down 132 and doing rip and removal and reinstall of pavement. There was a suggestion that was never followed up on, was to actually go off pavement across the adjacent, down the adjacent properties in the dirt side, tie in, which would be far less expensive than going up 132. You could get easements or make agreements with those adjacent property owners to do it on the, off the road. There was never any follow-up to include the vacant lot that Irving owns adjacent to the Irving station. And there's a possibility that if you had approached Irving with a handshake and maybe a stub out for their future expansion. But again, that was something that was never followed up. So that 165 number, I think the public needs to be aware that involved pavement. And there are other options that were not explored, and the committee chose not to look at that. So it can be done for a lower cost if you can get the agreements of the adjacent property owners. So.
Thank you for making that point.
Couple of points, Kevin. Why couldn't you directional bore with the sewer instead of tearing up pavement?
To go under the road?
Yeah.
It's down at Walgreens. This is the
Yeah,
cleanup
but still,
there.
why couldn't you just directional bore under the road, not tear the pavement up, and then go down to J. Jill side and stay just out of the pavement? Directional boring, you would not affect the pavement at all. They're doing it all over the place now. I mean, you could drive a tractor trailer through the pipes that they're pulling directional bores now. The second point I'd like to make.
Can I answer your point there, Scott? We still have the ability to do that in the construction manager process. This process allows us to do that, to get those numbers.
Because I think what Chuck brings up is a good point. If we're so concerned with the environment that we're looking at a sewer project on West Main Street to get the public onto public sewer that's being treated, then it kind of goes backwards to build a public building and put a private sewer system in, and not hook up to the public system where we have the lakes regions, the rivers and everything, and we're trying to keep that clean. So I think there is a point there.
No, absolutely. I think that's a point well taken.
Go back to your point about where the piece of land that we bought. You had it on one of the slides at the top. That piece of property, I think you should point out on that slide, that piece of property is probably the only piece of property at exit 20 that was not on the tax roll when we purchased it. And that hadn't been on the tax roll since the diocese swapped land with Pike Industries back when Pike wanted the spot where the outlet mall is now. That land was swapped years ago, and that's why I think that land's so clear, is because Pike prepared that piece of property for the diocese before they swapped it. And I think that that's a valid point, that's probably the only piece on exit 20 that was not on the tax roll. So therefore, it's not on the tax roll now, but it didn't affect us negative. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we had talked about that point at the beginning. Actually, I don't think you were here then. We were talking about it earlier. One of the business owners was in here at one of our meetings, and he kind of chuckled and said, you know, we're crazy if we don't jump on this. He said his business would pay $1 million for that right now. And the fact that the diocese wouldn't allow that anyway. So that's obviously what makes it a win for us.
One other question. Why the building at an L shape as opposed to a straight building? Is there a reason why it's an L?
The number one reason, with the aesthetics that you get, we talked to Gary about that, is when you drive into the driveway and you get the prominence and the width of the building, the way it fits onto the lot. And then when we tee in the T section that goes out to the rear and has great length to it, and it allows us to have that space to the left. We're barely fitting that onto that piece of property. So we talked about, and if the selectmen want to speak to that, I heard Catherine and Peter chatting about it, and they certainly have had a lot of conversations with us about the jogs in the building. So we actually had a few more jogs that we cut out. One of them was here, and in squaring that off. So the number one answer that our architect gives us is certainly the curb appeal and the aesthetics of driving in and seeing the prominence of that. Yes, thank you, Pat. The public and private driveways, the fact that this is the private, for official use only driveway, and the way that he fitted in, it was a puzzle piece. So, did I miss something on that? Or the way that it was explained to the selectmen?
No, that is the way it was explained.
Okay.
There was also one eye on possible future parking for the ball field that we didn't want to encroach on.
On this piece here?
Yes.
Yes. So the potential, well, not potential, but the additional gravel parking area here, or whatever it's going to be, is truly trying to fit all that in, as Gary says, was a puzzle piece. We talked about paving all the way around the entire building, and as you can imagine, it's going to be double the cost of asphalt, so that was one of the other things that was pulled from that. What else, Scott? You said you had 3?
Nope, that was it. That was the third. Thank you.
Can you talk about energy efficiency and any requirements relative to energy efficiency?
Yes, absolutely. So when we went through the project, we talked about our values within the walls, in the roof, and all those things. It's a block building, as you maybe can see. It's a block building with normal roof insulation. The windows are all energy efficient windows that we went through, the LED lighting. We had a visit from a solar company. And we talked about, we wanted to make sure that we went down that avenue, and it was not feasible for us, the type of contract that they wanted us to enter into. And I think you folks were at that meeting, and one of you mentioned about solar, right? The first meeting we were at. And after that meeting is when we pulled in the solar folks to look at that. It didn't make any sense for us as far as that type of efficiency. The HVAC system, as far as the air handling, I don't think any of the windows operate
Probably
because of the HVAC.
No. There's energy recovery units in the ventilation system as well.
Is there anything else that you want to talk about, David, as far as the energy efficiency that I'm kind of hacking memory for?
Well, as far as the latest IBC, we've got the continuous layer of insulation in the cavity. So I think we've got 3 inches of continuous insulation behind the veneer. So it's the CMU construction with a continuous 3-inch. And I think we're cold roofs, or I forget what the R value is for at the blowing level, but it definitely exceeds the energy codes.
We had originally talked about in the attic, putting attic trusses in and putting plywood down so we would have that area for storage. The controversy was what type of a stairway do we put? Do we lose program space? Do we have an elevator that goes up there so we can bring things in? We chose to just leave it attic trusses. No plywood. We'll deal with that when the time comes.
We do, wherever we could, we did put the variable refrigeration systems in that could pair future solar, when and if that could happen. So where we could, we went towards those heat pump types systems.
Other questions?
I'd like to just make one last comment about the sewer system, and that is that this particular building is located right on a huge aquifer, which is very important to the water system in the area. So, to me, that's one more reason to put the sewer system in and not a septic system.
Absolutely. Yep, very well. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
I just had a question. I don't see where you have an adequate parking area for people coming in.
Adequate parking area, so this would be the public entrance here. These are all public spaces here. And then this area here is all of the, for official use, so if there's training, they would park on this side. The other piece we have here is this is all gravel. So for some reason, they were going to run a community function that's going to be there, and we're going to have 50 or 60 people in the building. We have the ability, this is all gravel here also, so we do have the ability to park all the way around the building. That's where the conversation came from of, well, should we put the asphalt all the way around now? So this is actually going to be graded, so we can use it for that purpose. Does that answer your question?
Yes. All right, they sell the old police station, does that go towards the purchase, the price on the new one?
I think I'll let the selectmen answer that, because they answered it eloquently last night.
Tim, you want to get into maybe some of the details of the bond?
Well, I can answer that very briefly. So the money from the sale would go into the general fund, but the selectmen have the capability of using that to reduce the tax rate at the end of the year. So it could help to offset the cost of the bond. It could be used in other ways too, but it wouldn't be able to directly offset the cost of this project.
Yes, sir.
How much do you think you could get for the old police station? Does anybody have a rough idea? I know it's kind of...
Well, the appraisal is a little over 400,000. So.
Right now. Yeah, that's the other piece that our committee never considered, is depending on the timing of that. If the market were to go down, I guess that could be a consideration of the timing of how we do the project.
And in all likelihood, probably prior to town meeting, we'll have maybe an informal market analysis done of it, so that something that wouldn't cost a lot of money to do, but get a feel for as a commercial property what that would go for.
So if they sold the building for the assessed value of what it's assessed at, that money would be put into a fund that could be used to reduce the tax, possibly?
It would go to the general fund, and then any money in the general fund that becomes our unassigned fund balance at the end of the year, the selectmen have the ability to use some of that money to offset taxes each and every year. So that would be up to the Board of Selectmen at the time if they wanted to do that.
I like the sounds of that, though.
Yeah.
A lot. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any time frame of how long it would take to build it?
Yes, actually, David, if you'd like to address that. It's been a common question.
Good. You get the okay.
Yeah, we have 8 months for construction. Yeah.
The intention is shovels in the ground as soon as we can after town meeting, if it were to pass. And then 8 months after with a ribbon cutting ceremony.
Yeah, and again, it's the fact that it's a relatively clean, flat site that allows that to happen versus, you're spinning your wheels for the first month, blasting ledge, or, dealing with wetlands or what have you. This is a pretty straightforward site, which helps.
The other piece that we looked at that's part of our strategic thinking is last year, for the first year that our committee was in place, we spoke about this at the town meeting, that there was not enough time for our due diligence in presenting you with a building. We certainly could have and just kind of thrown one on the table, but we said no, let's wait, let's give it another year so we can present the right building. And the fact that this year, out of all of the potential capital projects that could happen, whether it's in our school system, the fire department or here in Tilton alone, this is the only, other than the sewer, is the sewer definitely going to the town meeting?
Yeah.
This is the biggest project that we're presenting. There's no other capital improvement projects from any of those other critical infrastructure buildings throughout our community. So what we feel makes this also good timing. I suppose we could look at it and say that it's never really good timing, but that was a key factor for us. We kept looking at that. Any other questions, comments, concerns? I like the suggestions because we have time to work on all of those. You know, our committee obviously felt to go the direction that we did, but we can have those as ad alternates. Scott?
Just to make another point with what Chuck said, as a water commissioner, one of the sites that we've identified as a well site for the public water system is close to the pond on the J. Jill site by the highway.
Oh, okay.
So that and that aquifer flows in opposite direction of the aquifer that we're currently pulling from on the 140 site.
Okay.
So that is important in case we ever had a major incident on the 140 site.
So we'll take it. Committee members and select, did I miss anything? Did we hit everything? Yes, sir.
Well, just briefly touch on the EMPG grant.
Yeah, Tim, we can, now that you mention it, Tim and I can talk about it now. So the emergency management performance grants are federal dollars that we can use. We currently use them frequently here in Tilton anyway. The sign that's out in the street announcing what we do, that's emergency management, EMPG funds. The generator that's at the current police station, and the local emergency operations plans that the chief and the community work on every 5 years, the hazard mitigation plan, the COOP plans, the
MDTs as well.
The MDTs at the police station.
Some of them, yep.
So those, we currently have access to those federal dollars. For this particular project, there's the maximum of $125,000 that's available, and we haven't been guaranteed the money. But the fact that we don't foresee any issues with obtaining that $125,000 for the emergency generator and the some of the surveillance, exterior surveillance, and then one of the dispatch consoles for radio communications. So that's $125,000. There's a soft match portion on that, which the building itself goes towards the soft match. So the question had been asked, well, what happens if federal dollars freeze up and we don't have access to that? We're actually building the building with the ability to take a trailer generator, so we could utilize it if we needed to. The fact that we will still be able to function without those items. And we'll be able to make do with subsequent years in applying for those dollars. What else on the EMPG funds? I think that's pretty much it. It's pretty cut and dry. The fact that, well, why is the generator and those other items not in the budget, just in case it doesn't pass? If we put those in there, that's supplanting federal dollars. So I'm not real interested about, I don't know whose name would be on the document, but.
Yeah, we can't do that.
Yeah, we can't do that.
Can't do that.
So that's the reason for it being formatted that way. So Tim, if you want to talk about the finance portion. Is there any other questions for me? Thank you.
One, before you said.
One, you said one last time, Scott.
On the possibility of, on the tower with people, would it be a possibility? Is it possible to have the people that come in be enough revenue to pay for the tower?
Depending on who the tenants are. I mean, we can throw darts at the project and see.
But is that a possibility out there?
To offset? Yeah, I mean, depending on how many tenants we pull on. The key part is aligning the offset now and getting into those memorandums of understanding and signing documents with them. I mean, that's to get into an MOU with the feds right now. You know, whether it's the FBI or the DEA right now. My guess is it's going to take a little bit of time to do that. So whether it comes to offset after the project that would be for the selectmen to figure out how that goes.
But I guess I'm just asking, what is the actual revenue that comes from something like that, for someone going on someone's tower?
Depends on the size of the microwave dish that they put on, it depends on what type of signal they're looking for. There's tons of different factors. Propagation studies, obviously.
But is it a one-time payment, or is it multiple?
Depends on how you set it up.
Yeah, I've seen mostly monthly, but you can factor those in, and you can actually sell those if you want to get a upfront payment.
Thank you.
So you can.
Does that help?
Those can
Yeah,
be
that's
sold.
what I was, I was
Those
wondering
are
if it was a
often
one-time payment, or is it multiple over time?
I've seen it go both ways. My previous life, there was 5 different tenants on our tower, and they paid towards that space on an annual basis.
Thank you.
Yep. So hi, my name is Tim Pearson. I'm the town's finance director, and there is nothing like having to talk to a group of people about bond rates on a Saturday evening. So hopefully I can keep it lively. It's very short and sweet. First of all, you may be aware that the Federal Reserve, they meet quarterly. About 2 or 2.5 weeks ago, the minutes from their December meeting were announced, and a lot of people were looking to see, was there any discussion about increasing rates in 2020? And there really wasn't. There was a reticence to be able to do that during an election year, and as such, when the bond bank, which is the New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank, which is what a lot of municipalities use in pooling their projects together to get a better rate. And when the bond bank went out just on January 8th, they received some incredible rates. 20-year was 2.15%, a 10-year was 1.47%. And while they didn't have a 25-year project in that offering, they're estimating that a 25-year bond would be 2.5%. So what we're looking at here is the warrant article for the entire construction of the project at $4.7 million, 2.5% interest rate, 25 years. So the way this works is we'd be going through the application process directly after town meeting. There's a deadline for that, and the bond would actually be funded in mid-August. So part of the warrant article is an amount of money for interest to pay for a short-term construction loan during that interim of the start date to mid-August. So that's in the warrant article. But for the bond itself, even if you round it up, you're looking at $42 per 100,000 of property value. So if you own a piece of property that was assessed at $100,000, it would be $42 in additional tax based on the 2019 tax rate. So if it's a $200,000 property, it's going to be double that, $84, and $300,000 property, triple that. So it's possible that the actual offering is done in July. It's possible that the rate could come in a little lower than what they're anticipating, because they're generally conservative in publishing any planning rates, which is what the 2.5% is. So it's entirely likely that that could come down. Their planning rate for the 20-year of the one that just came in at 2.15 was 2.25%. So that would be our hope, but otherwise, this is what we have proposed. The first payment again would be due in 2021. Any questions?
That's for a 25-year bond, right?
That's correct.
But you didn't have the figures for a 20-year bond at 2 point whatever it is.
Yep. 2.15. Well, so
what would it be?
So I presented those figures this last week. The challenge of that is that you have more principal you've got to pay in those 20 years. So the selectmen would be given the authority to enter and negotiate a bond. The actual warrant article doesn't specify whether it's a 25-year, 20, or 15, or 10. It just says the Board of Selectmen are authorized to be able to enter into and negotiate a bond for the $4.7 million. So this is an example of what the payment would be and what the tax implication would be for taxpayers based on that 25-year. But all options would be before the Board of Selectmen to review, what they feel is best at the time and based on input from taxpayers and their own judgment. So
I was just curious if it was at 2.5% at 25, and it came in at 2.1% for 20, the difference, that's all I was curious.
if I remember correctly, I think it was about a $44,000 difference. It was slightly over $300,000 payment.
So how much would that be for the $100,000 house?
So,
roughly?
so here's something for you all for town meeting. When you think about expense, every penny on your tax rate is $6,207. And it's essentially our equalized value divided by 1,000. So in that case, if you're looking at $44,000, what would that be?
8 cents.
Roughly 8 cents, yeah, 8 cents additional. So you'd be looking at $50 per 100,000 versus 42.
Just curious if the rate was a little lower, what the difference.
Well, and of course, keep this in mind that this is a planning rate. So once we have better visibility into a closer time period to when the offering is going to be made, we'll have better knowledge about what the rates are likely to be. And and if there is a case where there's very little difference, or it makes more sense to go to a shorter term, clearly you save on interest by doing that, but you also hike up the payment a certain amount. And as you know, the Board of Selectmen has to take into account all the taxpayers in town, and an entire spectrum of economic conditions that they face.
I think the taxpayers in town are really, from what I've heard, are concerned about this. We know we need it, there's no doubt about it, but with the recent rise in assessments, where a lot of people are paying quite a bit more, that's why I was concerned about, what the difference in the payment was as far as that goes.
Right, and
Because of the assessment rise.
And it was a hit to everyone, myself included. I'm a taxpayer in Tilton, and I felt the pinch as well. The one thing I can say is that in 2020, because we don't have the purchase of the land, for those of you that were here prior to the start of the public hearing, I was discussing what our tax rate implications are for 2020. So that equates to a reduction of about 49 cents when it's all netted out. So we're looking at maybe a $5.89 or $5.90 local town tax based on the current budget the way it is, if that gets approved at town meeting, based on our estimated revenues, based on a lot of estimates, but as best as I can tell at this point, we're looking at a reduction of about 7.6% in our local rate. That doesn't include what the fire district does not include what the school district does, and so forth. But in terms of our own local rate, it will.
That's because we pay for that land in 1 year.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And that's the net effect of that, essentially.
Thank you.
Yes, Scott.
Tim, can you give an understanding of the timeline? If the project was to pass at town meeting and it's 8 months build out, what is the financing gonna look like? Are you gonna go get a bond immediately to start it, or is there a timeline before the bond is secured?
Right. So there's what we have planned, which is very typical, is a bond anticipation note, which is essentially a short-term note, very short-term note, that its only intention is to borrow money to be able to allow the construction to take place. And a lot of municipalities do it in one big chunk, so they get the entire amount up front, but you pay more interest that way. So we've always negotiated to do a drawdown, so we get the authority to be able to borrow X amount of money, but then only draw down what we need at that time. So as we're working with David and Milestone and through the construction project, as we're looking at, very closely following the payments, the invoices, and seeing what kind of, what kind of cash flow we're looking at, we'll have a much better picture. But we've factored in the amount in the warrant article to cover the maximum amount that we would need during that time period. I think it's probably going to end up being less than that because of the scale. There's a certain amount of time before things get started, a certain amount of time before the invoices are due, so on and so forth. But once the bond is funded through New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank in mid-August, that ban is paid back. That bond anticipation note is paid back in full with the proceeds from the bond.
So you're thinking from April to August, there would be a ban?
That's correct.
And then in August is when you would take out the actual bond?
Well, that's when the bond would be funded. So that's when we would receive the money, if you will, which would go to pay off the short-term ban.
So I guess my thought is, if we have from the time that we have the March meeting and it passes, if it passes, couldn't the selectmen put the current PD for sale with an understanding that they're going to be there and there's a timeline when they're going to be out, and possibly the selectmen could sell the building to apply toward the proceeds? Does it automatically have to go into unfunded balance? Could it go towards the project?
It couldn't, because it's considered the sale of town property from the Department of Revenue Administration's standpoint. So the selectmen, though, can use that money, as I said earlier, to offset the tax rate, which in effect, once we have our first bond payment in 2021, they could say, gee, we sold that building for $400,000 last year. Let's pay for the entire $259,000 payment, if this were the bond, in 2021 with some of that proceeds. Or let's spread out that $400,000 over the next 8 years and pay $50,000 down from our unassigned fund balance on the tax rate to account for that $400,000 and even out the payments. One of the things that I'm always concerned about is people's escrow accounts, for those that have escrow accounts, because when the tax rate fluctuates, so banks and mortgage companies often apply a factor to what that tax increase was, and they'll send out a notice saying, well, now you have to pay more, every month to put into your escrow account, and it can really wreak havoc on somebody that has a tight budget in their home. So that's one of the aspects of maybe spreading things out. But these are all decisions that the Board of Selectmen would be faced with.
But my point was that we have a current unfunded balance now, right? Mm-hmm. And what is that?
Roughly $840,000.
So my point is, if the selectmen were a clear understanding that they knew that they had sold the PD building, let's just pick a number, 400,000, because it makes it easy. Take out of the and not bond that 400,000 into this big bond, the amount of money that we would save in the payments would far exceed anything else that we'd be doing here.
Well, so the purpose of this discussion tonight was not so much the finite, idea of, how we could, things like that. But as you know, and as the board knows, I try to find every way possible to keep our payments low. What we're trying to do is show this is the published cost at a 2.5% rate, which is what, if you called up New Hampshire Municipal Bond Bank today and said, what's a 25-year rate on a bond? It's going to be 2.5%. And so, but as you know, Scott, and we talk a lot about town finances, I'm always looking for a way that we can find to reduce that. But the official answer from DRA is that would be sale of town property. It would go into our unassigned fund balance. So, are there things that we could possibly do that would reduce this amount? Yeah, and there's also, keep in mind that 4.7 million doesn't include the gifts and donations and other aspects. It also has the maximum amount of contingency that the town's holding and that Milestone's holding. So as Kevin said earlier, in all likelihood, that number is going to be less. But for the purposes of discussion and for the purposes of understanding what a maximum cost is going to be for someone, property owner, that's what we're looking at. Does that answer your question? Yep. Yes.
We were talking about gifts and donations. I know Mr. Garnett donated $25,000, but they were also pledged 25. But there was that $450,000 that you were hoping that you'd be getting donations and pledges for. Is there any kind of system set up at this time for those donations?
Not formally, but I believe Town Administrator Forrester is working on something to where that can be formally put in place, and we can start to get pledges and start that process more formally. I know there's been a bunch of discussions amongst the business owners, and maybe the chief or someone would like to speak more on that.
I know they've created like opportunities where people could, have a brick or a tile at the location in memorial memory of someone, or sponsored by someone.
Like $50 for a brick or something.
Yeah,
like
they've
that.
done that in YMCA's and other municipal properties, so we're looking at doing that here too.
Well, if you walk up on the walkway behind the railroad station in Laconia, all them bricks and things in the walkway there are all donated by people that must pay for something like that type of thing, I know it's probably doesn't amount to $4.7 billion, but that would be good. But I'm sure every little bit would help.
Yeah, no, we like that idea too, and been talked about a lot.
One of the stories that I had shared at 2 previous meetings was when we first purchased our land and built a house, no kids, built a simple spec house ranch, and it was right around the same time that Riverfront Park was being designed, and we looked at that as how are we possibly going to be able to afford that as a family. And at the beginning I was totally against the project because my taxes would go up from a project that was not critical infrastructure. And my wife and I joked a couple of weeks ago about, thankfully that project went through. And Catherine reminded me that, a great portion of that project was through community donations. So you look at, something like Riverfront Park, and it really is a sign of who Tilton is and the types of projects that we get behind. So whether I agree with a project at the beginning or not, I'm pretty thankful that I've stayed here and we have things like that, and we've been able to afford it as we've moved forward. So certainly I think there's a distinct difference between a park and critical infrastructure, and there's certainly a big difference between pricing. But as you think about what we have, we look at this building as another pinnacle of our community. So on the behalf of the committee and everyone that's worked with us on this project, thank you for being here tonight. Hopefully there'll be enough support so we can get this project through. I know it's a really big decision for all of us, but if we haven't given you the information that you need to make an informed decision, please, please, please reach out to us. If there's something that we missed tonight, or something's just not making sense to you, please ask us, because we really need your feedback. So, thank you all.
Thank you.
Up on the icy night. Well, lightest boat.
What's your first name, John?
Yeah.
You used to come to Gene's uncle's office.
Oh, yeah.
I was in his house.
Right. So you had all the tab cases behind you. Yeah. 30 years ago, 20 years ago, I don't know. Let's wait till it's done now.
Thank you.
Did quite a bit of work on the little guy across the street. Really? You got it. Nice. Every time I'm up by it, well, not so much now. Somebody else would like that. She likes it. He's got a room up there. Works by
Oh, no, that's okay. It's just, I got so many numbers rolling around. I don't want to, but
Right, yeah. Okay. That'd be just as bad. It looked like, you know, oh, now it's here we improve.
What did they say? Two short things right.
Yeah, that's right. Except for Bo, he was saying he fell smooth, you know. Yeah, nice talking to you. Okay, bye, Ron. Good to see you. How are you doing? I'm good.
I'm going to officially close the bond hearing, the public hearing
Time being
on the bond.
7:35.
And the time is 7:35. Thank you all for coming.
Mr. Chair, we have some suggestions by the moderator for the upcoming elections that we need to go over and make sure that we have some answers for him. I've written them down. One is that the selectmen have to settle on a location for the town election. We have?
You sent that out.
The high school? Okay. And then a reminder that all selectmen need to be present at the elections. If you're not, you need to find a designee. If you can't be, you need to find your designee.
So a point of clarification, I'm supposed to be there from start to finish?
Yeah, that's,
Per the law.
Yeah.
Well, a selectman needs to be.
No, all of them.
5 of us, all day.
All 5 all day.
That's new.
No, it was the same way last year.
There's a bill in the House right now to reduce it to 1.
And last year when Chuck brought that up and clarified it, I had Sandy stand in for me for a couple of hours, so you would need to find someone to fill in for you for a couple of hours and let him know ahead of time that that's who your designee is. He's gonna try to utilize the selectmen within the process, election process, like, you know, greeter and checklist and changing back into an independent, whatever. And then this goes to the chief. He's asking to make sure that you know that we need a minimum of 1 extra police officer, because that time it's during the school and there's buses and traffic control and things like that. So 1 to 2 extra, because you have that one that's inside that's required by law. Okay. I think I did, Chuck, okay, because you were here with me listening. So that's the 4 things that he's asked us to take care of.
And Jeannie, you confirmed with the school for both the election portion and the deliberative session.
I did. I sent an email to Rob, superintendent, and he said that the election, the February election, the March election, and the town meeting would all be at the high school. Now I'll go back and confirm.
That's confirmed.
Yes.
And then you can let Chuck know.
I did. He just, I thought for sure I'd sent that email out. I did, okay, thank you.
No, I remember seeing it, so I didn't know if something changed from that point till now. All right.
So, we've completed everything on the agenda, except for any other business that might come before the selectmen, and then after that, we're going to be going into non-public personnel, and that's it. Jason, what's happening?
Come on, Jim.
Thanks. Is there anything else that you want to bring up or anything?
No, I've been away on Thursdays because I'm chairing the Fire District Budget Committee, so that's kept me out of your hair and your hair
Yeah.
for a few Thursdays, so we've got a bye week this week, and we'll be coming back in. But,
Well, nice to see you again.
see you.
Pat, you want to make a motion on that to go to non-public?
Make a motion, we go into non-public for RSA 91A:3 personnel.
Second.
Constantino, yes.
Dawson, yes.
Desmond, yes.
Scanlon, yes.
I just read the back page of your.
I'd like to make a motion to seal the minutes of the non-public session as they pertain to personnel issues permanently.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
I assume, I just have to try to jump in there before Joe adjourns. I assume you don't need to want a second public hearing on the bond. Kevin said he was good.
That was the longest public bond hearing that I've ever had, is 10 years as a selectman.
I know.
That was more like a public hearing on the police building committee.
So, is that,
Did they need another public hearing? Are they good with it?
he said he's fine.
He said he was
Yeah,
fine.
I think
What
it's
is,
the largest expenditure we've ever had, so.
Yeah.
what is the moderator letting them do at town meeting?
Kevin's been in contact with them and, they're working it out, so we're having conversations about, so Kevin seems pretty comfortable with that.
He's good, I'm good.
Okay, and then one other thing I keep forgetting to ask you. Downstairs, in the basement, you've been down there, you know how
Scary.
shoveled it is, and I was gonna get some volunteers to help clean it up, but at the time they came, I couldn't be here, and I wanted to really manage the whole thing. But, wondering if you have any interest in, us purchasing some shelving so that we can at least get the file boxes off the floor and organized, the ones that are.
Where would you put the file boxes? You mean the sewer file boxes that are on the skids?
Those, and there are other file boxes, so I was in Lowe's the other day when I picked up those containers, and they have shelving.
$44?
Well, they do have those, but the ones that I looked at, this one here, it's $80, and
The
it's,
heavy duty, yeah.
and it holds 800 pounds per shelf. So I had asked him if we had, budget for it, so, thought maybe we could start with 4, which would be like $320, if you're interested. I mean,
Having had to go through those boxes on the floor downstairs, I'd love to see them get organized in some
and
fashion.
I did talk to Kevin to ask him if, could he do it cheaper than that? Could he build them out? He said no.
Yeah, you don't want wood because it can hold moisture and
Yes,
get mold,
metal.
and that one, and you should also put them at least like 6 inches off, so the metal's not touching the floor too.
Yeah.
But I'm for
Yeah.
that if there's sufficient,
I just,
if that,
They can't go
it's a
through it.
mess.
You're just talking about putting them on the shelves and not going through the boxes.
oh, no, I'm not, no. That was one of there are some file cabinets down there that Tim had suggested we take them out of the boxes, but I think they should stay in the boxes and be put on the that's what I think.
Well, the sewer commissioner,
Yeah.
so if you're gonna go through the boxes, you can't. You'd have to discuss that with the sewer commissioner. So just putting them on a shelf is fine. Those boxes were moved out of that room when the roof leaked once. They were quickly brought down there, never brought back up.
I think they would be better off the floor. So anyway, 4 of them,
How would you find any of the records?
You know that room that you come down the stairs and right on the right-hand side where the stairs are, that room with all that stuff there? If you took the shelving out of that and put those steel shelvings in that room, that would be nice, because it would be a nice walk through and you could get all your things right there. some of the wooden shelves that they're on aren't really that sturdy.
Yeah, wood's not a good idea in the
Well,
basement.
in the stuff room, that stuff's been there for 20 years.
Yeah.
There's some, yeah.
So if you could take the shelving down and got rid of some of that stuff that's been there for 20, 30 years and put the steel racks in there, it would be really nice and neat and clean up all that. And is the police gonna take their
How's
stuff
everybody
once
feel
the
about
building is-
$320 for 4 shelves?
Hi.
Aye.
There you go. I got two.
So,
Yeah.
yes. Pat, you good with spend the money? And Peter?
Yeah, anything to organize it.
Get
Well, we're organizing sewer stuff, but eventually, once they get it organized, we'll have it
It's gonna
open.
help everything else.
Help.
That's gonna help everybody.
And once they get their stuff out of there, we can put our stuff on there, or whatever happens with it happens, but we still gotta keep our basement organized and work together.
I do have one question that just dawned on me, and you might know the answer to this. The two statues, the broken statues, is there a timetable / plan in place to do? Okay.
Yeah, so you probably know that the Historical Society went down to DPW last week to take a look at them. Yeah, John had called and asked if they could go look, and, you know, all this has to be done. You have to do it in steps, so this has to be done first. And that means, you know, we're moving the file cabinets from downstairs up here. And then, if you recall, we were gonna move the glass case in the conference room that you have down there, really make that the historical, you know, with all the other things down there. And so, once this is done, then you'll be, you know, for the next step. But it doesn't make any sense to rush that. And then John did ask me if I could look around for grants to help with the base of the one. The one that he initially wanted Kevin to make a base for, and I'm happy to do that, but it can't be an L-chip grant, it'd be like a loose plate grant or something else. And I don't know if it's really that historical. I'd have somebody from the Preservation Alliance come and look at it, but.
It's not a great statue maybe, but it's not carved marble, for instance.
Right.
But it does have historical significance to the town of Tilton, certainly.
So, you know, one way around it to the answer is, it's in process, but, you know, there are other things that need to be done first, or should be done first.
Okay.
So.
Just curious. I have no reason to doubt you.
It has not been forgotten, nor will they let us forget.
No.
What happened to the other glass case?
Take it away.
Because we voted to donate it to
Judy Tilton.
Yeah, did she get it?
She did not. I sent her 3 emails and asked her if she wanted it, and got no response back, so.
Where did it go?
DPW.
Where's the stuff that was in it?
It's right there. I took it.
But it didn't go in the trash though, right?
Huh? It was not it's down at DPW, but I don't think it was not in great shape. I mean, at least when we were looking at it. Unless it was not historical in value. But anyway, they took
But
that
I'll
one.
be ready.
I'll put it up with the other stuff.
Go.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Motion to adjourn.
We wrapped, Catherine, we wrapped it all up, all the bottles.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So, moving that downstairs.